was attacked as being a charlatan, a fraud. And then people said, well, it works, but it's only because people expect it to work. I said, no. My students do not expect it to work. In fact, the first few times it works, they're so shocked they can't do anything. I learned that attraction is not necessarily what this is, but about what kind of emotional states, how can I trigger, engineer, channel the states of consciousness, create the states of consciousness through which I want that woman to look at me. How can I get her focused? I prefer not to leave things to chance and to engineer things. And so everything I'm doing, I'm being strategic in the way I use language, but that's guided by me thinking, what state do I want them in? All these idiots of the other schools say, demonstrate higher value. I want to deliver higher value. Your best proof is your own results. So go out and try it.
If you ever thought that there was more to attraction than just what we see and hear, you would be right about that. Here I have Ross Jeffries, the godfather of seduction. At least as far as people I know, you have more wisdom about the psychology of attraction than anyone else I know.
Thank you.
And I want to pick your brain about that. And I think there's a lot of people out there, they don't feel attractive because they think that they're not attractive. It's severely limiting them from having the kind of experiences with women that they would like to have.
That's a very bad self-perpetuating loop, isn't it?
It is. Before we get into the how, let's just define attraction first. Not really looking for a textbook definition. I'm just looking for more about how you think about it.
As NLPers, we know we want to avoid nominalizations, which is essentially to take an action, a process, a verb, and turn it into a noun. So the first thing I'm going to say is going to be a little bit shocking, but there's no such thing as attraction. It is a process that occurs in the neurology of the person being attracted. For example, do they feel a warmth spreading through their chest? Are they making imagery in their mind, doing the nasty with you? Are they talking to themselves in a very seductive tone? What is their breathing pattern? I would even go so far as to say that attractiveness does not exist in you. It only exists as a process of flow of neurological responses that arise in the neurology and the brain and the heart of the other person. It is a subjective, internal experience the other person flows. Are there things, qualities, behaviors, traits, states that you can use to trigger that? Yes, absolutely. But attractiveness is some objective quality that exists without the observer being there. No, it only exists in the presence of the observer and the person experiencing it.
I think your story really says a lot about, well, just your journey that you had to go through, because there was a point in your life where you were so incredibly frustrated with not dating, probably feeling very unattractive, not being able to date the kind of women you wanted to date, and that where enough is enough, then that usually is where we begin to learn something new. And you hit that breaking point. I think there was even a story you tell about it where you were walking down a sidewalk or something and you just kind of...
So I went to UCLA, go Bruins. And my hormones were on overdrive anyway. I was 20 years old when I entered UCLA. Campus of 40,000 people, there were 20,000 co-eds, and like 20% of them were really hot. And they were everywhere in all my classes. Water, I like to put it this way, water everywhere and not a drop to drink. Now, I didn't know it at the time, but many of these women who I encountered were attracted to me. I just was so blinded to it and so filled with shame about my body. I'm 6'2". I weigh about 215. I put on a few pounds. A lot of it is muscle, though. It is, I'm just saying. Back then, I was my height, but I weighed 130 pounds. So I was skeletal, had tremendous amount of shame, body shame. And I remember one day I was walking up Bruin Walk, which was the big walkway, the trail, the path that intersected the college for the most part. I remember yelling out, when am I going to solve this? Later, I came to find out all my intuitive voice comes up and to the left. That's my submodality. Said, when you solve it for yourself, you'll solve it for everyone. And when you solve it for everyone, you'll solve it for yourself. And then in 1987, the story is garbled in my mind. It was a long time ago, Damon. I was friends with this girl named Stacy, really short girl. She lived in an attic. Her roommate had a book called The Structure of Magic. If you've read The Structure of Magic, you're a liar because it's so awful.
I forced myself.
I couldn't get through it. And even Bandler says it's unreadable. But then I saw Frogs and the Princes and Transformations. two of their first books that were really wonderful. And that hooked me. And I began to think, okay, how can I use NLP to get over all this stuff going on in me? And how can I figure out how to use it to communicate with women in a way that's seductive? How can I use Ericksonian hypnosis and come up with these language patterns? Interestingly enough, I have a copy of my original book that I wrote. This is a 1992 edition, How to Get the Women You Desire in a Bed. The first one was 1988. I'm going through and I thought, this is good stuff. This is primitive compared to what I can do today, but it's really good stuff. This really works. And so I also happen to think, and this is going to sound mystical, but I really do believe this. I think I came along as an answer to a cry from the collective unconscious of men who needed someone. And I came along just at the time when the internet was being born. It all came together. The stars all aligned for me to become Ross Jeffries, the character.
What would you say is the single most important thing that you learned about the psychology of attraction that changed everything for you?
It's when I learned about NLP as well, that process is everything. Content is important, but process is everything. I learned that attraction is not necessarily what this is, but about what kind of emotional states, how can I trigger, engineer, channel the states of consciousness, create the states of consciousness through which I want that woman to look at me. How can I get her focused? How can I get her hypnotically entranced with me? How can I use my language to create states of arousal so she feels her heart thumping? And I asked the right questions. I didn't think in terms of behavior. Behavior would be, how do I get her phone number? How do I create the states in her? How do I become an aerospace engineer? Not aerospace, but Eros, E-R-O-S. I met a woman on a plane who I seduced. She was an aerospace engineer. I said, well, so am I too. E-R-O-S, and we had an interesting conversation. Point being, I thought not in terms of behaviors that I wanted. That's when everything turned around, when the switch happened. I thought, how can I get them into these emotional states using what I say and what I can get them to talk about? That was the big change.
So a lot of people watching this or listening to this might say, well, that sounds very manipulative because I did the technology and it worked. What I then discovered is that you're not really doing something to them as much as you're sharing an experience with them, and that the emotional states that you're talking about are very positive and fulfilling, and they feel really good. So it's not like you're like doing something to them and then you're tricking their brain and then they're just doing whatever you want like a zombie. No, they are enjoying this. They're really, and that's where the attraction is.
Exactly. And this is when a big barrier at first, until I get them past it. Men say, I would never want someone to talk to me this way. Well, a woman is not designed to arouse and attract and connect with you. The analogy I use is a very disrespectful analogy, but I'm going to use it. When you go fishing, you don't bait the hook with what you like to eat. You bait it with what the fish bites down on. But sometimes in my mind, I'm saying, come on, bite down, bite down, bite down, bite down.
So I remember you in one of your trainings, you said, don't tell the women what you're doing while you're doing it, but that you had, in fact, told women what you had done. And I thought, I'm going to give that a try. Because here was the other thing, that when I was dating women, even when we would break up, we would stay friends. And other women were starting to comment about that. And I think it had a lot to do with the speed seduction, the technology, because you build this connection with them. And so even when you move on, it's not like they hate you now. It's like, oh, well, okay, it didn't work out romantically, but we're still connected. And so I felt comfortable showing some of these women your book and everything.
Yeah, balls.
And yeah, and so I wanted to see how they would react, and they would say, "What? But no, but I really like you. It had nothing to do with." I was like,
I know.
I was like, "Do you remember when we?"
That's the power of the tech.
Like, yes, I know. I was able to show you something true of who I am, and it was through this process, like you're talking about. And one of them read all the scripts that you wrote, and they were like, "Well, this is what women love to hear anyway."
I know. That's why it works.
Yeah. But it's more than just words. It's like you're saying, it's what it creates in their mind.
Yes. And language, if you underestimate the power of language too, as my meditation teacher would say, it's nothing to do with seduction. He'd be appalled if they were connected. Although he thinks what I do is edgy and funny. Language structures consciousness, shapes decisions, drives behavior. You can either use your language with deliberateness and have power in the situation, or you can use it in a sloppy way. What happens, happens. I prefer not to leave things to chance and to engineer things. Engineering and manipulating are not the same. Engineering is you're creating the conditions for something to arise. Manipulation is when I'm either using force, threats to the use of force, misrepresenting facts, deleting important information, or outright lying. I don't advocate for any of that. What I'm talking about is engineering. Can attraction be something other than accidental? Can it be something other than an event? Can it be something that you engineer as a result of how you observe, what you do with your language, how you get the other person talking, what you get them talking about? And that's my claim, and you have seen it in action. You know for yourself that it works. Tens of thousands of guys will tell you that it works. Can everyone do it? No. You have to be smart.
And you have to practice it.
And you have to practice. If you're a dumbass or you're lazy, forget it. I'm just saying, it's not for everybody.
Let's dive deeper into like, how do you leverage psychology to be more attractive? Part of that has to be she starts to think you are attractive. How do we get to that from 0 to now she's thinking you're attractive?
I always start with my state first. How do I want to go into the interaction? This is a great metaphor. I was thinking about what I was going to say in our conversation. I was thinking yesterday. The analogy is a safe cracker. So let's say I have 2 safes and they're dialed the old style. It's not digital. It's where you have to listen to the tumblers as they click. I have 2 safes. One has the crown jewels of England. You'd be wealthy beyond your dreams of avarice if you could get that safe open. The other is a bag of dog poop. Okay. If I'm there and I'm focused on what's in the safe, and that's where I'm putting all my cognitive real estate, I'm not going to be able to put my attention on the sound of the tumblers, am I? So the first thing I do is I divorce myself from the outcome, from the reward. I don't think, oh, this is going to be extra special good. You have to have that mindset of, yeah, I would like to connect with that lady and boner or whatever it is, but we need to put that to one side while I'm process oriented. So you've got to be process oriented. And if you can, enjoy the process. That's number one. Second, you've got to begin to draw out attention through some kind of initial conversation, some kind of initial approach. I want to go for a state of focus and where the person feels free to have fun, engage in a fun conversation. So focus, fun, and then I want them to begin to feel a connection to me. An incredible connection. I'll talk about what is it like to be connected. And most importantly, I want to activate the part of their brain, the part of their consciousness that's highly imaginative, felt sense in the body. I don't mean necessarily emotional feelings. I mean warmth in the body, tingling here, throbbing there. And so I am focused on states. One of the things I teach in my conversation code, which you can get for free, it's very simple. You consume it in 10 minutes. I don't do...
Where can people get it?
Go to seduction.com. You'll see right there on the website, the conversation code, 10 minutes max to consume it, if that. I don't ask questions like, what do you like to do for fun? Because that gets a factual answer. Oh, I like to skate. Oh, why do you like to skate? And now you're getting into the interrogation. Instead, I want to ask a question that's going to trigger the imagination, the emotions. When you want to do something that makes you feel totally alive, there's an embedded command. Get your heart beating hard, really hard inside. A little sexual metaphor. And time flies by. What do you love to do? Or what's something you've always dreamed of doing, fantasized about doing, but haven't let yourself dare? And you'll see their eyes gloss over a little bit. They begin to, because to answer that question, you can't just do it from the factual part of your mind. You have to do a transderivational search, which you can define because you're in NLP or two.
That's when you take a feeling and you search back in your history to find its origin.
Yeah, more or less. But in this case, you're getting them project into the future. And I'm also beginning to open the part of their brain that fantasizes. Now, if I just went up and said, now, Debbie, in a minute, I'm going to ask you a question. That question will trigger you to open up the part of your mind that fantasizes, desires, suppresses those desires, and really craves satisfaction. Here we go. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. They tell me to fuck off. But the nature of the question is the same as doing all of that. I learned this, that the right descriptions, the right questions will trigger hypnotic states just as if you put someone into a formal trance. We're all in trance all the time anyway. Like Bandler and Grinder said, and I took this to heart. There's no such thing as hypnosis, and everything is hypnosis. I tend to think of things in a hypnotic state. That is my perspective, my skewered look, my offbeat look at interpreting things. What is the state of consciousness that people are in? How is their unconscious mind showing up, and how can I direct it towards where I want to go? I'll give you another metaphor. My nephew Seth is a magician in Las Vegas, and he was explaining to me, he said, you have to understand there's no wasted movement. Everything I do is designed to direct attention in a way that enables me to set up the next move, which is designed to direct attention to set up the next move. And then I do the switch to create a state of wonder. I set up their expectation, and all of a sudden I do something else. And so everything I'm doing, I'm being strategic in the way I use language, but that's guided by me thinking, what state do I want them in? And I'm also watching what are the responses I'm getting. Are they biting down, bite down, bite down, bite down, in which case I'll turn it up. Or are they not responding? It's just not triggering. Not that they're resisting, I'm just missing the mark. So I'm watching, and then at some point I'm going to think, okay, I'm hearing enough tumblers, time to open the safe door. And that's time for me to initiate some kind of physical connection. I used to like to pop women's heads with too much excitement. It reached the threshold and it was too much. So a lot of this is paying attention. You cannot pay attention and be well calibrated and watch the other person if your mind is thinking, I got to get her pants off. I got to get her pants off. So it's your state, their responses, how you calibrate those responses, and then what do you do with them? And at what point do you tug open that safe door?
You're talking about process, and he's aiding that process, your tonality. You dropped your tonality, especially when you said a hypnotic command. You also paused right before it. I remember learning this. This is part of that process.
And honestly, it's become such second nature to me that unless I'm doing an interview where I have to lean on it and exaggerate it so people will hear it, it becomes second nature.
Yeah, you don't have to think about it. And I remember one of the things that you had mentioned in one of your trainings was exaggerated at first.
Yeah.
So you exaggerate, you think you're overdoing it, but you're not. It's just you're not used to doing it, so they're not picking up on anything. So I remember the first time I tried this.
Were you shocked?
Yes, the woman's eyes started shifting back and forth, and I was like, oh my God, it's working. And then I lost my state, and I just couldn't do anymore because I was so shocked at how well it worked, or what was starting to work. And then I was just like, okay, note to self, like stay in state.
But see, this is what I enjoy hearing. When I first started doing my work, I was attacked as being a charlatan, a fraud. And then people said, well, it works, but it's only because people expect it to work. I said, no, my students do not expect it to work. In fact, the first few times it works, they're shocked. They're so shocked they can't do anything.
This was a concern of mine too, whenever I started learning the technology, is that, you're going to use it for bad or do something like that. And you could, absolutely. Well, if all you're doing is putting them in these really positive states where anytime that they're around you, they feel good, so they want to be around you more, that's attraction as well, unless, of course, you make a promise that you don't keep.
Of course.
That's the same thing.
And people say, why can't you just go the traditional route? I said, okay, let's think about it. You pick out a nice restaurant and you get a nice view and the soft light and the music. Are you doing that because you really want to watch her shovel the pasta down her throat? Or are you trying to create a mood? And they'll say, well, I'm trying to create a mood. Why? Because when they're in the mood, they're more likely to do what I want them to do. I say, exactly. Now, why don't you skip the restaurant, skip spending the money, go for a walk on the beach or meet for a coffee, and do all that in 30 minutes and keep your money in your wallet and not be confronted by the checklist.
And how is that not manipulation as well? If you're trying to set the mood and then the whole nice guy thing, if I just be nice to them, they'll give me what I want.
No, they won't.
Because of that, they think, well, I'm trying to be nice, I'm trying to do it right, and then they're not getting what they want.
You bring up a brilliant point. The number one things that gets in the way of your being attractive is entitlement and resentment. If you feel you're entitled to success, that resentment is going to come across, I'm going to use a sloppy word, energetically. People will pick up on it unless they're really blind, unless they're tapped out. And I would say envy, entitlement, despair. Those are the things that really block. Desperation is, I got to make this work. Despair is more like apathy. Like, what's the point? It doesn't hurt to take care of yourself. I was saying to your wife, women look at nails and shoes. Yes, they do look at, and we do. just because it's a sign. Do you care about your appearance? Do you care about, if you don't care about yourself, why are you going to care about me? Take care of your body. Just because we're living in these meat suits for, if we're lucky, 80 years, take care of the meat suit and throw away anything, guys, throw away anything that has holes in it or donate it, because that's another giveaway. And use basic hygiene. I used to kick guys out of my seminars. I say, there's someone here who smells like a fucking bus. I can't help you. On the break, I'm not going to point out who it is, because I used to do that. I was very cruel. I remember times where I would call a break and say, okay, there's some people in here who really stink. You need to go upstairs, smell yourself, take a shower. Do not come back into my seminar room smelling the way you do, because I'm gagging. And if you don't take care of basic hygiene, forget it.
So there's some obvious things, just fix those. Why make it an uphill battle by not caring about how you look at all? You're just making it harder on yourself. So do the decent stuff. But there's a lot of people think, unless I look like, and then just name whatever famous person or whatever, or unless I have that money, unless I have that power, that status.
The greatest status you could have with a woman is to assist her in feeling the feelings she really wants to feel. All these idiots of the other schools say, demonstrate higher value. I want to deliver higher value.
So what would you say to those men who are still stuck on that idea that they're just not attractive enough to have the kind of experiences they want?
I'm hearing my mother's voice in my head. I'm not joking. Attraction is as attraction does. Look, I give out, because what I say is so counterintuitive and so whacked out and so batshit crazy, disconnect the dots, color outside the lines, off the wall, think outside the box. Your best proof is your own results. So go out and try it. Data trickles down from multiple experiments. You got to do multiple repetitions and keep a log of everything you do. Write down. I have logs of women I sarged. That's what we call it, after my dear departed cat, Sargy. Women I sarged 2 years ago. Like every pattern I use, what the responses were.
So you're not so attached to the outcome. It's experimentation. It's information gathering until you find what works.
And be patient. It's easy to say when you've had some nice, successful interactions. How do you do it when you're in a great deal of pain because you've had no connection with anyone for 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, or you've had a lot of painful experiences? So having compassion with yourself, doing some healing work, either with someone like you or someone like me or somewhere, and having compassion for yourself. I would not survive, what to say, be happy were it not for my meditation practice. It's more important to me than NLP or hypnosis or anything else I do. I require anyone I take on to take on a meditation practice.
So let's sum it up. How to be more attractive.
Learn to use your language with deliberateness to engineer the states of consciousness, flows of feeling in the body, what they're visualizing, so they're naturally going to give you the behaviors that you want. Get yourself in a state where you're interested in the girl, but you're invested in your skills. In a breakfast of bacon and eggs, one is invested, the other is interested. Yes, you want the outcome, but you sort of have to wear bifocals. You have to look in the distance at where ultimately you want to be, but then you have to look close up at your next step along the path.
Anyone out there can go out there and try to figure this out by themselves, and that would be an interesting journey, I assume. Or you can start with something like the technology that you've created.
It's free, Conversation Code. It's a free resource, and if I were at the point where I could do it, I would just give away my stuff and say, here it is to the world. Go use it. Hanging up my cape. I've done my job. I can take a rest, but I'm not there.
So what I was saying is you can still go out there and try to figure out all this stuff for yourself. You're still going to have an amazing, incredible journey that will be all your own journey. I'm living proof of that. And
yeah, you are.
The technology just sort of points the direction, gives you more of a map to follow, but you have your own experiences, you have your own journey. And for me, it was one of learning to connect with women on a level that I had not been able to before, and seeing women as human, not as objects or what I was after. And that was the big surprise that I got from learning this stuff.
From my obnoxious marketing, pound the poon by the 1st of June. That Ross Jeffries marketer and the heart and essence of what I'm teaching are very discordant. They're not in alignment with each other. But It sells the potatoes.
That first conversation I had with you was basically, yeah, it was like, that's how I get the attention of men who are carrying these wounds around. And then they think they're going to be able to go do, you know, it's about going and doing this thing and getting this thing. And they learn it's part of the journey is healing that.
This I will bring up. In Sanskrit, there's a word, or Hindi or Sanskrit, it's upaya. Upaya means expedient means. I'll give you an example. The Zen student comes to the Zen master. He says, show me enlightenment, enlighten my mind. And the Zen master tells him, go fuck yourself. Just see the garden over there with the stones. Rake the garden for a year and then come back, you idiot. And the monk's all pissed off. He's raking the garden like, what does that guy know? Year goes by, he comes back. He says, all right, I break the garden for a year. Give me enlightenment. You didn't learn the first time, a-hole. I told you, go rake the flipping garden and don't come back. This happens one more cycle. And while he's raking the garden, his mind gets quiet. He becomes one with the rocks. He gets his enlightenment, not because the master gave it to him. The master tricked him into doing something, and he got something he wasn't expected. My marketing is the upaya, the expedient means to get people to pay attention long enough to dive into the technology.
Yeah, and so like I mentioned in our previous talk about the kind of women I was attracting, it was easy for me to overgeneralize that and say, well, all women are this way, which would have been terrible. And then my interactions with women probably would have been very sour. Instead, I recognized that, well, this is the kind of woman I'm attracting. This means that I am putting out something that is attracting this kind of woman.
Which is very brave and insightful and introspective of you.
Thank you. And so that's how I would recommend that everybody look at attraction, that you are attracting something. Even if it's nothing, then what are you putting out there to attract nothing? If you're wounded, you still might attract women, but you're going to attract women who are not going to be good for you. It's going to be very toxic and dysfunctional, most likely. When you heal those wounds, you start attracting women who are more suited for where you are in that journey, I found for myself.
I think so. You show up in a different way. Something comes up in a training. I think it was your mentor, Steve, who did it. He said something, the way you holler at the mountain is the way your echo comes back. You were hollering at the mountain metaphorically, and your echo was coming back to you in a certain way. Yeah. For some reason, that metaphor popped into my head. I think it was John Grinder.
Yeah, so if you don't heal those wounds, chances are those wounds, you're exposed in a certain way, and it's going to attract a certain kind of person, and it's usually not going to be good if they're attracted to a wound in you.
No. Yeah. But life is inherently wounding.
I think we're full of wounds. That part I agree with you on. But I think most of them are dormant until we start moving towards something we want, that we want to bring into our life or that we want to accomplish. And then that's what triggers a wound to come up as an obstacle. And then that's an opportunity to heal it, but most people don't.
Well, they don't have the ability to do it. They don't have access to the technology to do it.
If you like this conversation, you want more of this, we have another video coming up right here. You click on this video and it will bring you to another conversation with the legendary Ross Jeffries.